Hello and welcome to the latest AppLearn Podcast. My name is Andrew Barlow. I'm the Director of Product Strategy at AppLearn, and today I'm delighted to welcome William Tincup, President of Recruiting Daily. William is a thought leader in the HR transformation space and has been for many years. He's spoken at over 150 HR tech conferences and other conferences around the globe, and it's my pleasure to welcome him here today. Perhaps the most amazing thing about William is that he happens to also support the best soccer team on the planet, which is Manchester United, which is also dear to my heart. So, William, welcome to the AppLearn Podcast.
This is when we start to do a chant right here. This is that moment.
I can do that. If you want to do that, we can do that. I know them all. They might not be appropriate for this specific podcast, but I know them all.
Oh, there's certainly a few of them that are inappropriate. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Like, I can't wait to kind of dig into the topics that we're going to be talking about, and it's just wonderful to hear your voice. So looking forward to it.
Same with yourself. I think it's important to mention that I've followed your career now for many years. In fact, actually, when AppLearn was created as an organization, we met probably within weeks of AppLearn actually starting. And I know that adoption has been something that not only are you passionate about, but you've also spoken about at many conferences.
A lot of it is it's a real passion that came from kind of a 2009 experience that I had with practitioners that had bought software, but it was sitting on the shelf. And I thought to myself, well, it's like buying milk or buying a milk carton and then letting it expire, or buying a car and not driving it or whatever. And then, so it really kind of planted a seed in my mind of, it's not just about buying the software, which is hard enough for practitioners, by the way. But if you buy the software and people don't use it, you've gained nothing. You've actually moved the needle in no way. And it's really planted a seed in my mind that, this really becomes a game of not just buying. I mean, buying is important. First of all, sussing out vendors is important. Buying software and negotiating contracts is important. Like, so all those steps are very important. But consumption, usage, adoption, how do you get people to really leverage the technologies that they buy? That's actually the game. And so, so I got passionate about it in 2009 from.
Yeah, fantastic. And but you're on a new journey at the moment. You're the president of Recruiting Daily. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I joined Recruiting Daily about 2 years ago to help them build an events business. The Recruiting Daily is kind of a one-size stop for all hiring needs. It's a media play, which I had never worked in media, so I've gotten the opportunity to learn a lot about media, which was good. And really, they really wanted to kind of build out not a conference business, because conferences are pretty difficult to put on, but kind of a smaller, intimate city tour type of business. And we've had 20 events now. We've got 8 scheduled for 2008, and it's a fun part of the business. The main thrust of the business is content. It's articles, and we have 2 to 3 articles published a day of unique content. And so that's the business, and I love it. It's so different than anything I've ever done before. I feel like each day is unique. I'm not having the same day twice, because I'm learning something new about how media and about media in this space, because really I'm still at the intersection of the practitioners, the HR and recruiting practitioners, and the HR and recruiting technology vendors.
Amazing, yeah. Yeah, it sounds very different to what you have been doing in the past. But that's what I love about you. Every time I meet you, doing something different. It's great to see that's being successful. And I think with a name like William Tincup, you need to be on TV or involved in some sort of media. So I can't believe that for 1 second.
Do you know there's a Tincup whiskey? Have you heard this bit? Do you know that there's actually a Tincup whiskey?
I know there is a Tincup whiskey because it popped up on my Instagram, and I was thinking, who knows? Is this some sort of stealth marketing from yourself or something like that?
It's a whiskey company in Colorado that had been around for a while, and it's out of a town. There's called Tincup, Colorado, not affiliated, and it's a high rye. It's a really, really nice whiskey if you like that type of whiskey. And it's just kind of the cup, the top, the lid, if you will, is a shot glass.
Oh,
So you can literally unscrew the shot glass.
everything you need.
I mean, you're done. You're already ready to drink.
I love the efficiency about that. Why don't we make the bottle a glass?
Yes, done. You just unscrew it, pour it, done. Like why
Exactly.
we don't need a glass.
Yeah, maybe we should think about that, about the way that we design software, the way that that was worked out.
Exactly. Back to user experience, right?
Exactly,
I
which is a good segue, which is a very good segue. So what we really wanted to talk about today is something that we've seen since we first met, and that is the issue around UI and UX. Now, I remember when you were speaking about this way back then, and I think that I'm going to enjoy talking about it today. But for the listeners, really, this is the challenge that we see in the space. We speak to many customers on a day-by-day basis, and there seems to be a myth that we're hoping to dispel on this session today, and that is that the UI and the UX and the intuitivity, if you like, of software is going to solve all of your adoption problems. And I think that it's come to the point where businesses are even not budgeting for things like change management, things like training, purely because they feel like people will just adopt it by osmosis. Now, what we want to do today is unpick that and really understand, where that's come from and, what the impact is having on businesses that are looking to maximize their investment in digital transformation, and really understand where that challenge has come from and where it's going to go. I mean, William, from your perspective, you've talked a little bit about this topic. Where do you think that this has come from, and how have you seen that it's affecting organizations?
Sure, it's an extension of if you build it, they will come. So this is yet another myth of software, and a lot of people point to Google as kind of the genesis of this. That Google just a search box. They don't have a lot of training. You don't have to teach people how to use Google. I don't understand what's lost in some of that translation is Google's a 20-year-old company, and everything behind Google has a lot of training behind it. So like how to actually use the back end of Google, not just the search
Like
box.
Google AdWords and things like that.
Yeah, there's tons of training that's there. So a lot of people, I think so. The genesis and where this started is people were looking for a shortcut. And I think I blame both sides, actually. And if you want to even throw in consultants, you could do it as three-way. I blame practitioners for thinking that that there's a shortcut. I blame vendors for selling intuition as a shortcut, and I blame consultants for letting any of that happen. Change is change. It doesn't matter what the change is. If you did it one way and then you're doing it another way, there is a delta, if you will, between the way you did it and the way you are going to do it. And that's change. And human beings require facilitation of that change. They need something, someone, actually, even in application, if you will, they need some facilitation around change. It doesn't matter about how intuitive. And when we say UI UX, sometimes that's even foreign. So it's even kind of, let's make sure people understand user interface. UI is how is the software and how it's laid out. The experience, if you will, is how you proceed through the software. As you go through the procession of whatever you're trying to achieve. If it's an ATS, it's a hiring process. If it's performance management, it's that process. But it's how you proceed through the software. And I'll tell you, Andy, what people are really, really hurting themselves with now is as they don't budget for change, the realization of these things are actually impacting employee experience.
Yeah.
So something that we haven't really kind of thought about before, like I'm a great employee, let's just say. I don't know if I've ever been a great employee, but I'll just throw it out there. I'm a great employee. We change software. So for whatever reason, the business has made the decision to go from software A to software B. And I don't know how to use software B. And you've provided no change leadership to help me get over there. Training, obviously, is one of those things, but there's a number of things. I'm now used to be a great employee. Now I'm not a great employee. And worse than that, I'm thinking about leaving the firm because I can't master the software. So it goes far beyond, way beyond just the usage of the software, which is important
Yeah,
enough.
and I think I mean also for the listeners as well. I think you mentioned there, there's three sides to this. There is the vendor, there are consultants, and there is the practitioners themselves. And I guess this isn't necessarily a witch hunt.
No,
I
no.
guess from our
Yeah.
perspective, what we're talking about here is it's pretty new, right? Roll back to the days of the older HR technologies that were only really used by HR practitioners. Enterprise-wide SaaS technologies have now been flipped on their head, and self-service has been introduced where it's not just HR that's using HR tools, it's the whole business that's using HR tools, which amplifies the adoption challenge. But I think, to be clear here, is that there has been a scenario where the vendors have indicated to practitioners that they don't need to invest in communication, in training, in change because of the software's intuitivity. And I think that's an issue because I've spoken to a number of customers that have gone down that route and have come, or route as you would call it, and have come out the back end of that situation where they've had adoption challenges, and not only that, they've got some real bad feedback, but they also don't have a budget to fix that problem
Oh,
because
yeah.
they didn't request one originally. So then they have to start being creative in understanding that. So really, the aim of this panel is to sort of bring that to life, and and sort of in some ways educate people on how they can reconsider their approach to this.
So the old phrase, lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? It applies here because vendors don't want the sale to slow down. So they'll say anything, and I love vendors. In fact, for the 17 years of my life, I've worked with nothing but software vendors. So I actually not just love them. This is how I've made a career and money, and all of those things. So I love them so much I can and do talk frankly about them. They don't want a sale to slow down. So they'll say anything to keep the sale moving in the right direction. Okay. They might even believe it at their heart. But what's really going on is it's a shortcut. They're selling a shortcut. Some of that's laziness. Some of it is deception, just in general. Some of it is they know that it's cheaper to talk about something in that way. Again, when you're talking to a practitioner, you want them to kind of feel like, hey, this is going to impact your business and it's not going to cost that much because of the way we design the software.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sounds good. Like as a practitioner listening to that, it's like, wow, that sounds good. Problem is logic has been lost in the translation. Hand someone a car for the first time. Can they drive it? No. Hand someone a plane first time. Me, you, or me. I'm not a pilot. For the first time, I get in the pilot's cockpit. Can I fly the plane? No. Then we keep going back to every type of machine ever made and ever will be made, and for the first time, for the first few times, you've got to have some type of facilitation that says, yeah, don't push that button, push this button. Don't pull that lever, pull this lever. When this
Mm-hmm.
happens, do this. Somebody's got to do that. That change management that happens because again, there's the old way of doing, and there's going to be a new way of doing. That delta, it doesn't matter how intuitive software is. It doesn't matter how the experience is, the process is. It's still going to, you're still got to manage the delta. And so, again, I think some of it is on the vendor side is them not wanting to slow the sale down. They're under pressure of quarter-on-quarter growth. They
Hmm.
want the sale to move as fast as humanly possible. On the practitioner side, you have a little bit of naivety, okay, and a little bit of it sounds so good that they don't probe it. And so I think some to fix, and I know that's some of the things we really want to talk about is how do you fix this, is there's a list of questions that practitioners have to start understanding how to ask about adoption and about consumption and usage and how are we going to get through this that pierces the UI and UX discussion. Yes, I get it. You know what? All software is intuitive. Right now, at this point in our juncture, it's not 1980, it's not 1990. All software that's built today is intuitive, or you get out of it. I mean, imagine your smartphone. You and I download a game, and we load it on our smartphone. We look at it, we start to play it. If it's not intuitive, or if we don't like it, we X out of it and we delete it.
Exactly, yeah, exactly, and it's a war. If you take gamification in general, the competition to retain users has never been so high, and as a result of that, game creation organizations have to focus on adoption more than anybody.
That's right.
Which is why, personally, on a personal level, I'm actually doing some research studies into gamification adoption and looking at how some of those processes could be applied to the enterprise as a separate topic. But yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. I think as well, the other thing that businesses miss is the how-to bit. How do I execute this process? You mentioned two processes before. ATS, performance management. At the end of the day, if we didn't have people leading those processes, people hire the right people. People develop the right people. And without people at the center of this, these processes wouldn't be successful. The software is an enabler of the process. Now, it's an important component. Okay, and it does have its own adoption issues, but what I say to a lot of the organizations that that I go and meet with, I speak with, you got to look at the broader transformation here, not just about the software, but also about a change to the process, or a change to the behaviors required to execute the process, or a change to culture. Are we asking you to culturally do something different than you've ever done before? Self-service is probably the biggest example of that. Is there a change to strategy? Are we now acquiring our talent from somewhere else than we have done before? LinkedIn, perhaps? Do we require different skills? So if you take each of those sort of 6 blocks, we have an adoption model at AppLearn, and those are the 6 kind of blocks. UI and UX very much fits in the software component. So we encourage businesses to think sort of a little bit more broader than that. But nonetheless, as you say, this myth is shortcutting all of that, saying that, just because this software is, intuitive, you don't have to focus on cultural adoption. We'll just tell people, people will just get it. Unfortunately, it opens a new thing, which is have to versus want to. People say to me, I feel like I'm ranting. I will stop in 1 second. But people say to me, I use the term Google. On a previous panel, somebody that one of the practitioners that we had said that everyone promises an Amazon-like experience. But at the end of the day, we're working in an enterprise world. I'm not buying some new batteries or a fluffy toy for my new child. I'm trying to develop the performance of my enterprise. It's a fundamentally different thing. It's not a transactional process.
It's not always not a transactional process. You might not do it, but once a year. So you're not good at it. You don't have the muscle memory of it. I think one of the things you want to coach practitioners towards is taking UI and UX and the conversation around UI and UX and making it table stakes. Yes, your software is intuitive, and there's going to be a great experience. Let's put that off to the side, because if you're building modern software these days, that's a given.
Yeah, it better be. It better be, or I'm not buying it.
Exactly. So that's table stakes. Let's stop talking about UI and UX. What happens? Let's talk to the practitioner in 2 ways. What happens if users don't use the software? What do we do? then force the conversation to away from UI and UX. That's a given. Yes, of course, those are things are there. But what happens when they don't use the software? What do you do? What do we do? How does it get fixed? And really, centrally, what that is a conversation around waste.
Yeah.
And that's that. I think if we coach and we really talk to consultants and the vendors, practitioners, and talk to them about waste, about buying something and not using it. So UI, UX, yeah, given, yes, modern software, both contain UI and UX that are fantastic. However, what if I have users that have learning differences or learning style issues and they don't use it, or they fundamentally don't understand the
Hmm.
change of what the old way was to the new way? Again, at the end of the day, they're either using the software or they're not.
Exactly.
They're either leveraging the software to the max or they're not.
Hmm.
And so I think we have to actually ask the negative question. What a lot of people do at the beginning of a marriage, what happens when things go badly?
Yeah.
What do we do? And this is the same kind of conversation that the practitioners need to have, and it's a tough conversation with practitioners because they have to actually push the vendor into an area of saying, you're selling me a story that everyone's going to use the software at the max. That's what you're selling me.
Exactly.
Okay. What happens if that doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Now take me through that.
Take it a step further, though. I mean, I'd love a practitioner to ask this question of a vendor in a sales scenario. When the vendor, and by the way, I'm not beating up on vendors either, because I personally have, I've worked with a lot of the major vendors,
Right.
and I would say out of most of the challenges that we see for businesses, it's actually not the software. It's actually the broader change that is the issue. That's a separate point. But what I would love to see is a scenario where the vendor says, by implementing our technology, it's going to increase your performance by 5% per annum. It's going to reduce the cost of X, and it's going to do this, and this. And I'd love the practitioner to say, that's fantastic. What happens if only 50% of our audience truly engage? Do I only achieve 50% of the benefits that you're promising me? And they don't.
That's right. Yes. No.
That's what we always say. Was adoption considered as part of your business case? Or, the one defining quote, does your business case assume 100% adoption?
That's right. That's right. The assumption, get into the math. Again, the math all sounds great, in a pitch. We can get you to this place at, with this number and all of that stuff. Again, sales tactics wise, great demo. The software shows well. It's beautiful. Like these things are all emotional, and are the emotional the strings are being pulled that we fall in love with both the salespeople. That's emotional, and the software, we fall in love with it. But one of those things, whenever there's math that's presented, ROI, cost benefit analysis, what we've got to do is do a better job as practitioners of asking the assumptions around usage, consumption, and adoption. So, okay, so again, to your point, you've shown me some great math. I mean, I can sell this math to my CFO and internally. This is great math. I need to know a little bit more about your assumptions. So show me. Let's now dig into the math, if you will. Show me the assumptions, because again, 50%, 20%, 10%, 90%. Show me what we're talking about. Because if this is 100%, then that's great. First of all, fantastic, check. You get an A plus. Show me how we're going to get 100% adoption.
Exactly. And I've had the same scenarios, and I'd be interested to hear whether you have too, where we talk quite passionately about adoption, because in my opinion, it is probably the yardstick by which project success should be measured. It does have the direct effect on ROI. But I have had organizations come up to me and said, Andrew, we totally get what you're saying, and we've overlooked this. The problem that we've got is we've already sold this to our business. I've got, organizations that have not even implemented yet, but have already sold or missold
Yes, missold is
the business case to their C-level, and to go back, and actually say, well, yeah, by the way, guys, we said that we don't need a budget for change, and this is really intuitive. Yeah, we'd like to revise that. Takes a lot of guts.
Well, here's the deal. Well, it's not just cuts. No, this is where your kind of your ethics and morality kind of crisscross. If you know that there's a problem and you don't do anything about it, you're the problem.
Yeah.
So here's the big boy pants. You've got to actually, when you recognize that as a practitioner, and again, I love practitioners. I'm certified. I speak at a lot of HR conferences. HR is in my blood, and I love HR practitioners. But it's time for big girl and big boy pants. That when you recognize that as a problem, you've got to walk that in to whomever and say, okay, here's the deal, because that's life. That's life.
There's a song there, William.
Yeah. We'll cue the song. Georgie, cue the song. Done. That's life. But it's seriously, this is how life happens. You assume something, and you sell it to your friends and colleagues as one thing, and then you discover that maybe some of your assumptions were false. That's life.
Yeah.
Okay, so to do nothing.
That's what all the people say.
Right. To do nothing is actually, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's what we've got to actually talk about, is like, well, you recognize this is a problem. You're intelligent enough to recognize this is a problem. And you're not walking into the CFO's office and saying, hey, here's the deal. That it isn't guts. It's
better to do it then, though, than to do it afterwards, because in the other scenario, and again, I've seen this, a huge pharma in the UK rolled out one of the major vendor solutions, which you know very well, and I won't mention by name, and they went down the route of, this is going to be intuitive, not going to be an issue, people don't need training. 1 year post go live, the project went that bad that they had to go back to the well.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take guts. That's not good at all. Better to do it beforehand than to do it afterwards. But a lot of organizations
it's waste. That's what it is. It's waste. And then I think if we talk to people about, listen, waste not, want not, you've got to actually have the conversation with the vendor and internally that nothing's easy. Again, there's no shortcuts. If we think that there's a shortcut, we should challenge that assumption, because nothing of value comes for free. You've got to work hard at every one of those things, and consumption of software, adoption, usage, etc., is one of those things. You've got to work at it just as hard as you work at everything else.
Exactly. And I think people that'll be listening to this podcast will be asking the question of, okay, we get it. What's the answer? What do we do about this? And I'd like to sort of give some insights into what I've seen with certain clients. And I think the first thing to say is that this is not just a flash in the pan. You can't just focus on go live.
Mm-hmm.
Adoption doesn't begin at go live. It begins the first time that anybody is communicated to about a specific change or transformation. Mm-hmm. And I think the second thing, and this is most difficult, is most businesses are not geared to sustain adoption over time. Traditional on-premise, implementations were a big change effort, and then you went into BAU and it just ticked along. What the emergence of cloud technologies and SaaS technologies did is it shifted that to, hang on a minute, change is not just, as I say, a flash in the pan, change is constant. So in the world of SaaS and in the world of cloud technology, change is constant. And that singular thing has actually contributed to a need to sustain change over time. So a lot of the organizations that I speak to, first of all, that are successful identify that, this is not just a UI or a UX issue. This is about helping people adopt digital transformation. And second of all, any solutions that we put in place not only have to help people adopt this new transformation today, but we also have to consider how future users are going to be onboarded to this application and its associated processes.
So there's a couple things there to unpack. One is go live. There is no such thing. So yet another myth. There is no such thing as go live, because the very moment that you say you go live, you hire a new employee, or an old employee leaves, or there's a new iteration of the software that comes out that has changes in it. And new iterations in software sound great. We're going to have a new release once a quarter, once a month, once a week. Every new release contains change. And so in that release or iteration of the software is change. To your point, change is a constant. It's a never-ending. And years ago, 20 years ago, I used to sell websites, web development, and I remember telling people, looking them in the eye, and telling them, if you think that this is a one and done, we should stop talking. The websites are never done. It is a never done project. You have to actually deal with the ambiguity of, you're going to be making changes to this website until you die. That's user adoption of software. Because the software manufacturers are innovating, which is good. This is what you want them to do when you buy SuccessFactors or Workday or SAP, or pick any of our favorite friends. When you pick these, you want them to innovate. You want them to continually do R&D and integrate with new technologies and innovate and do new things. All of that you want, but be careful in what you want. You want that, but how that dramatically impacts the organization is that every time they iterate and change, you have to change.
Exactly.
So I think one of the things to coach practitioners about, when they recognize the problem, and again, I think you're right. I think after the sale, it gets infinitely harder. Prior to the sale, it's a little bit easier to talk about and fun.
Mm-hmm.
But let's deal with the after the sale stuff, because I think it's primarily, most practitioners are in this position. You got to look yourself in the mirror. This is the hard part. You got to go and look yourself in the mirror, and you got to look at all your vulnerabilities and everything that's there, your flaws, mistakes, all that stuff. You got to look yourself in the mirror, and you have to admit the problem. So that's the hardest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's not someone else's problem. It's easy to blame the vendor or the consultant or anybody else, but you got to look yourself in the mirror, blame yourself, and say, you know what? I didn't see this. I didn't ask some of the right questions. We have a problem. We're not leveraging the spend. We're not leveraging the software in the way that we thought we would. We now have to create a plan, and we have to fund the plan. And now I have to go and talk to my peers, and I have to go and talk to the upper management, and I have to talk to some subordinates. I have to talk to everybody about, you know what? We made a mistake. We made a mistake insofar as we thought that this was going to be easier. The transformation was going to be easier than it is.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? It isn't. And that's okay, because we recognize the problem now, and we're going to fix it. Here's the plan, and here's how we're going to fund the plan. And I think that, man, it starts with that practitioner looking themselves in the mirror.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because actually, and this is a cheeky plug, the next audio panel that we've created actually is not a thought leader panel. It's actually with some AppLearn customers, and these are customers that are specifically looking at the operational adoption post go live. And we've also invited some other organizations on to talk about their experiences. And these specific organizations have deliberately created operational adoption teams post go live.
Good. Smart.
Whose job it is to focus on optimization of these processes.
Genius.
Well, it is genius, and I can't wait for that to be aired. But what I would say is that it kind of contradicts the original business case.
No. It doesn't.
Because and it's a bitter pill to swallow. Because you're promising efficiency gains.
It doesn't kind of. It absolutely destroys that. Because what we're really dealing with in every major group of in a company, so marketing, sales, HR, recruiting, etc. There's a position that's being developed and have been developed that's called operations. So there's a marketing operations, a sales operations, HR, recruiting operations, etc. Who's doing the adoption operations? And that because again, it never stops. When you buy software, someone's going to have to be working with people because you're going to have new employees. So go a year into the sale. So we just implemented Workday, fantastic, and let's just say we're having a great job and things are good. Okay, go 2 years into that, and we just hired 100 new employees. Now what?
Exactly. Or thousands of new employees in many cases. Some of the industries have 15, 20% employee attrition. And we even I've been in a number of different scenarios where I've been advising businesses, and we say to them, they'll say, oh, okay, so basically we need to help 20,000 people adopt this, and I'd say no. You need to help 24 in the next 3 years. Because if you're gonna if you've got a 10% attrition rate, you need to consider future users, and they say, oh yeah, well, we didn't really think about it that way. So these are the things that we're helping organizations think a little bit harder about. What I do want to move on to now is how you see this unfolding in the future, and I really want to pull this back to the UI and the UX discussion. Do you think that we're still going to meet practitioners that are telling us that the intuitivity is going to solve all of its problems, or do you think that that's something that is slowly but surely going to fade away?
It will fade away because people are going to have bad experiences. So that's a good.
It costs money though.
That's right. The good news is people are going to fail enough to where it goes away and they stop trusting that. But really, UI and UX is table stakes. I think practitioners who need to kind of come to grips with, yes, software that's built post 2010. If it's not intuitive, then it shouldn't have been built. If you don't have a great procession or experience, it shouldn't have been built. So yeah, let's stop talking about that. Meaning that's assumed. It's almost like assuming when you get a calculator that it has a number 9 key. Okay. It's
If you speak to my CFO, it definitely doesn't have a number 9 key. It has a lot of zeros, but not a number 9, especially when we're budgeting.
Yeah, it has a 9 key, right? Yeah, of course it has. Or you buy a new Mini, and it has a steering wheel. Yeah, of course it has a steering wheel. So let's make that one of the discussion points for practitioners is that you don't even mention UI and the UX because it's assumptive.
Yeah.
Of course it does. What we need to be talking about is like when you use that example of 20 employees, 20,000, 24,000. I actually make that an infinitive where it's forever. And again, if you want to get yield out of the software, again, you challenge yourself now as a buyer. Why am I buying this?
Mm-hmm.
Am I buying this for fun? Am I buying this for sport? Am I buying this to transform a business, to do something? And if so, then I've got to get people to use it. Okay, well, if I've got to get people to use it, that's a never-ending battle. And it's not just the 20,000 or the 24,000. It's forever. It's those people every time they change the software and every time you add a new person. So what's the adoption strategy when you have a new employee? What's the adoption strategy when you see that somebody's kind of not into it as much as they once were. People lose interest, etc. Because again, we're getting to a point now where we're gonna lose. I know we already have, but we're gonna lose great talent because of the software we pick.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that HR has to, well, the board, the C-suite, the investors, and HR, we have to recognize that the game of a business, 80% of the value of the business comes from 20% of the workforce. That 20%, if they don't like your software purchases, they don't use your software purchases, they're going to leave because they have options.
Exactly. Yeah.
They'll go do something else. So now we need to look at software adoption as a retention strategy. So if we talk like that again, UI and UX, why are we still talking about UI and UX? Like, just are we talking about breathing air? No, we don't talk about breathing air. We just breathe, and the air goes in our
So
lungs.
your advice to, and I think this is a good segue into the sort of last points really, in and around what would your advice be? And just to summarize what you just said there, so your advice would be to a practitioner that is about to procure new technologies. First of all, when UI and UX is mentioned, you just take it off the table and say, that's great, we love it, it looks fantastic, and that's it. And then you start to talk and open up discussions about
Right.
functionality, features, and adoption.
And really, it's the adoption, the never-ending adoption. It's what practitioners need to say when they hear UI and UX is the phrase, "Well, it better damn well be."
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like you're telling me that okay, the car has tires. Great. Let's move on to the real important topics. How are we going to get people to leverage the technology at the highest level all the time? And I'm not just talking about day one or your fictional go live. I'm talking about to the end of time. How are we going to do that?
Do you think that vendors have the answers to that question?
No, hell no. No, that's why they sell it. That's why they sell it as UI and UX because they don't because it's
It is
hard.
hard. It is
It's a
hard.
pain in the it's a pain in the
I,
it's a
I
pain
know
in
I
the
know it's
tail.
hard. We know it's hard.
We know it's hard.
We've been talking about it for 6 years. But I think that the good news is, recently at HR Tech World in Amsterdam, I was saying to one of my other colleagues the other day that we've never had such fantastic reception at an event. We were by far the busiest stand, and I think that a lot of the reason for that is because adoption is a hot topic, and I think the good news is that organizations are interested in this that have implemented projects and it's failed. Organizations are interested in this if they're currently implementing a technology. But a lot of organizations are also interested in this now, even earlier in the buying cycle. And I think that I can only take that as a positive,
That's totally a
that our
positive.
message is getting out there. And I've never seen, I couldn't believe this earlier this year. We've started to receive RFPs for
Hmm.
adoption solutions.
Great, great.
And for me, that's a massive sign that organizations are starting to look at adoption. But it's, in my opinion, by no means is this done. It will fade away, but I'm still speaking to organizations that are telling me that they feel the tool is so intuitive, it's going to solve all of their issues.
Yeah.
What would your advice be? If you had to pick 3 key points of what you would advise a practitioner to consider, what would those 3 things be?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing you've got to do is you got to ask hard questions. You've got to ask the hard questions of the vendors because the vendors, their demos are flashy and lovely. Their people that are selling are flashy and lovely. But you've got to ask the difficult questions. So the first thing right out of the box is you've got to ask the toughest of tough questions. How do you make money? You know, how are we going to onboard and train and get people to consume at the highest level software for the rest of life? How does that happen? How are you going to help us make that happen specifically? Again, bore me with the details because The tough questions, that's the first thing out of the box you got to ask is, the toughest of tough questions. Because if you don't, that's when you run into problems. Because down the road, you didn't ask the tough questions, you assumed something, and then you found out that that didn't work out. Second thing is, I really want to know a little bit more about their specific roadmap, specific iterations, specific releases, both what's in them and when they happen. And I don't need to know 5 years out. I mean, whatever. Really, I want to know in the next 6 months to a year what specifically is going to change. What do you already know is going to change? Because that also impacts. That impacts all of our change. Everything that they do at their level and at their shop impacts what we do. So I want to know, first thing, ask tough questions. Second thing, you're going to definitely want to know what's on the roadmap and the iteration map and the change map, etc. And third, I want to talk to customers that have implemented the technology and have great adoption. So I want you to ask the tough questions, all the questions as a practitioner that you're really, in fact, if you ask a question and it doesn't make you nervous, you're not asking the right question as a practitioner. You've got to ask that question that makes your butt kind of butt cheeks kind of tighten up a little bit, or the hair on the back of your neck kind of raise up a little bit. You gotta ask that question, and a series of those questions. You're interviewing them
Mm.
as you're buying them, because you're not really buying them, you're leasing them, which is yet another important part to think about. When you're in that buying phase and you don't ask tough questions, shame on you.
With regards to that, my advice would be also, when you are speaking to organizations that have had good adoption, or even organizations that haven't, I'm sure that you won't get introduced to them by the vendors, but don't just ask the technical lead on the project.
Hmm. Right.
Ask to speak to the stakeholder whose project it was, because the technical lead will have, more often than not, will have implemented on budget and on time. The
Hmm.
stakeholder that you ask, they're looking broader. Am I getting the value that from this investment?
Hmm. Totally agree.
And it's the stakeholders who will have the honest answer to you and say, yeah, it was it
That's right.
was it on budget? Was it on time? Yes, it was. Are people adopting it? No. Is it delivering the value that I need? Probably not.
And it's tough questions there too, to your peers. So you're right. You're spot on. It's tough questions to them insofar as asking them, how did you do it? How did you get adoption? Tell me, get me into this, get me into the weeds. How did you do it? Did you use rewards and recognition? Did you use buddy programs? Did you use, a training that's inside the software? How did you do it? How did you manage change? Because I'm going to assume you got adoption. If you didn't, okay, that's fine. Tell me that as well. Let's actually just have a quiet moment together. No one will ever know what we're talking about, but tell me how you did it, because I'm terrified that I'm going to buy this software and our people aren't going to use it. And if you can tell me that you got it done, I just need to know how. Like, give me pointers. And again, that's being honest with yourself. That's looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself, and then talking to your peer group.
Yeah, and I think that is a great term to finish on. Honesty. From the moment I met you, years ago now, we've always had honest discussions with you. You've always been really clear and really transparent, and I think that that's a fantastic thing to have it. It's and it's good for other people to learn from that, that direct nature and that honesty, because you don't want to hear things that are dressed up. You need to cut straight to the issues and tackle them head on. And I think, William, that's certainly something that you definitely do.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you, brother.
So I'd like to say thank you for participating in this audio panel.
Absolutely.
Before I let you go, however,
Sure.
we always ask a few fun questions,
All right.
things that I'd like to know. So I'm just going to throw them at you, and we'll see what answers come back. I'm interested to know. So let's start off with number one. What have you got in your pocket right now?
Great question. And because it's
Considering it's early in the morning where you are.
considering it's early in the morning in the U.S.
Do you have pockets at all on right now?
I do not have pockets on right now, and I don't want anyone to imagine me in boxers. However, I do not have pockets on right now.
Okay, well, that's the most interesting answer to that question that we've had so far. The next question, moving on. If you could go back and give yourself some advice when you were starting your career, what would that advice be?
Great question. And, to listen more and to have patience. I've always been someone to kind of make quick decisions, analyze things really quickly, and make decisions really quickly. So I've God given a talent on some levels of being able to be really quick in the moment. But what I would have loved to have learned, and still a career learner, even at my age, I'm still learning a whole lot. Is just to listen more and to be patient with myself, because you're your own hardest critic, but just to be patient and know that you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that it's okay to make mistakes, that everyone makes mistakes. So that I think that the listening more and being a little bit more patient with others, around me, but also just patient with myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that great answer, and slightly different one now. But if you were stranded on a desert island, what two people would you most like to have with you?
Well, as a cradle Catholic, I would tell you I'd like Jesus, and because I'd like to be entertained, I'd like Bob Marley. So I would have Jesus and Bob Marley.
That's amazing. Just to let you know, I think that's an AppLearn podcast first. We've never had the answers Jesus and Bob Marley before, but I wouldn't expect anything less from yourself, William. So great answers there. Moving on, what is the best invention ever?
Well, the lazy answer is the internet. But if you go back a few thousand years, I think fire, the ability to create fire and control fire, I think was probably one of our better inventions. And then the use of machines. I mean, what separates us from monkeys is that monkeys can't use machines, and we can. We can use a wheelbarrow. We can use a shovel. We can use a computer or a typewriter or calculator or whatever, and monkeys can't. So every one of those is a series of, inventions that humans can do that others can't. And so, it just depends on kind of where do you want to start. Like these are all just grains of sand on a beach, as inventions go. 20 years from now, 40 years from now, people will look at the internet and they won't even think of it as an invention. Or as something that it's just that it was always there, like at the library, or clouds, or whatever. So
Exactly, yeah. There's a lot of studies being done at the moment into people that have been born since the internet was around. I was certainly pre-internet, but it's interesting to see how how that sort of affected them, because they've known no different, so to speak.
mhm.
Final question: who's had the biggest impact on your career?
So I want to go backwards real quick. This is a funny story and it's worthy. So I gave my niece. When she turned 13, she's now, 23 or 4. But at 13, I gave her an iPhone as a Christmas gift. About a year later, she and I were talking about whatever, and I said, "Man, isn't Facebook, isn't it great?" She's like, "Oh yeah, it's great." I said, "Yeah, the website, I wish it did this, that, the other, whatever, blah blah blah." She goes, "Oh, there's a website?" She had no idea that Facebook wasn't just an app. So I'm literally staring at my niece, going, There's a www.facebook.com. There's a Facebook thing that, I mean, like I'm explaining it to her. She's like, I don't get that. I just push a button on the iPhone, and then I do my bit.
That's
So
incredible. It's incredible.
so to the question of the biggest impact, it's easily, clearly Sam Walton. I got the opportunity to work with the founder of Walmart for about 18 months of my life, and I learned everything about business from that man. He was humble. First time I met him, I mean, he's a billionaire, right? First time I meet him, I've got long hair, braids, ears pierced, the whole bit. And I meet him, I said, Mr. Walton. And he goes, no, call me Sam.
Yeah.
And there's a humbleness, and just everything about business. He had this thing called Sam's Rules, and before we'd open stores every morning, we do a Walmart cheer. Like there's just so many things that I learned about business. And later on, I mean, 10, 15 years later, I actually went to business school for 2 years, and I found it extremely easy. Mostly because I had already learned a lot of the lessons from Sam.
Exactly. There's no better form of learning than doing, though, as well. And learning from the best. I mean, and there's not many. There's not many better than that to learn from. I guess.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Incredible.
No, Richard Branson, those that have been fortunate enough to have spent time, because he seems like one of those people, real genuine, real authentic, real smart, all of those types of things. Like, there's gals and guys that are like that. And if you're fortunate enough in your life to spend time with them, your life changes.
Exactly. I heard an interesting story about Richard Branson, and the story is called "A Rabbit in the Hand is Worth More Than a Christmas Tree." Have you ever heard it?
No, I have not heard it. Tell me.
Okay, so basically the story goes that Richard Branson and his friend had decided that this is when they were children, in order to make some money, they were going to plant some Christmas trees. So they got the seeds that they needed, and they knew that it would take 18 months for these Christmas trees to grow. So him and his friend went out one day, and they planted all of these seeds, and they came back about a week later, and they found that rabbits had actually dug the seeds up and begun to eat them. So he shot them and sold them to a local butcher and made some money anyway. which I think from an entrepreneur's perspective is just incredible. Make money no matter what. But yeah, the story is a rabbit in the hand is worth more than a Christmas tree.
Oh, it's genius.
Which is quite good, because this it says Christmas is coming up, so it's quite a festive story. It's a great story.
It is a great
story to end on. So, William, pleasure to speak to you, as it always is. Thank you so much for participating in this AppLearn podcast. I'm sure that all of the practitioners, vendors, and even the consultants out there will find the specific podcast very insightful. Wish you all the best for Christmas and the New Year.
You too, my friend, and congratulations on your new edition.
Thank you very much. Cheers, William.
All righty, brother.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. As always, you can find all of the podcasts that we create here at AppLearn across our various different social channels, and also on applearn.com. Please feel free to share and distribute the podcast, and any feedback would be more than welcome. If you would like to participate in a future AppLearn podcast, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.